welcome to the Backwards History Podcast. I'm your host, Will, with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin. Purpose of this podcast is to battle misinformation, miseducation, and all-around willful ignorance when it comes to the history of the world, and most notably, for us anyway, the United States of America. We're both graduates of Mississippi State University. I myself am a lowly IT guy, network engineer, but so I only have an IT degree. Kevin here's the fact checker. Kevin gave your credentials.
As my host said, I do hold a degree from Mississippi State University in anthropology, as well as a degree in history from Mississippi University for Women, admitting men since 1982, I believe. But as Will did allude to, I'm more or less the fact checker. I'm here to more or less fact check my friend here, make sure we don't tell you anything wrong or anything misleading, which would completely derail the whole purpose of our podcast.
I would like to note, though, a little disclaimer at the beginning of this, we do 100% reserve the right to offend anybody, but I don't foresee that being a problem until later.
Later, yeah, but at the same time, we hope you learned something in the process.
But as George Orwell said, if liberty means anything, it means the right to tell someone what they don't want to hear.
Which is easier said than done. We've all been in an argument, and most people do solve their arguments by a quick Google check on their phone.
Or keyboard warrior methods.
Oh, yeah. Keyboard gangsters are always fun.
Keyboard gangsters. I like that one. But the main deal for this first episode, we actually want to start out with a little bit of a lighthearted go at this. We're going to give 5 common misconceptions in the history of the United States. These are going to be more towards the early American history. And then episode 2, we're going to go into a little later American history, like 1920s and later, 5 tidbits. Start us off, Kevin.
Okay, we're going to ease you in with something nice and easy. Hopefully this won't offend anybody unless perhaps you're a dentist.
You're a dentist.
And that would be the founding father himself, Mr. George Washington, or General Washington, I believe would be a more appropriate term. And that was the myth that his teeth were made out of wood, and his most famous presidential portrait. That's why he's not smiling. And the truth of the matter... Let me give you a little more on just wrong there. The truth of the matter is Washington was a very wealthy aristocrat prior to becoming general of the United States Army during the Revolution, and he would have afforded much nicer dentures than just wood.
Actually, they're really gross and kind of creepy dentures, if we're honest. They were made of it was like a metal jaw with like animal teeth and some human teeth, which is a little creepy. I'm hoping they came from dead people or people who had them, removed by a dentist.
You would hope.
A random fist fight.
Random fist fight could, loosen up a couple of your teeth for you. But yes, as my co-host alluded to, you can actually see these online. They're in a museum, I believe in the Smithsonian, if I'm not mistaken. And they do look like just a monstrosity, really.
I was going to say, it sounds like it would be like a bunch of jagged teeth.
None of them are the same color or the same size.
Oh, that's awful. But I guess that would be better than potential splinters in your gums.
True.
I don't know.
And other teeth of other aristocrats at the time would have been made out of a more precious material, porcelain, which would look nice, but you're always very careful to chew, not to chip anything.
I wonder where people got the idea that he had wooden teeth. If in fact he had that crazy stuff, you would think that would be common knowledge.
Right, and it's an interesting question. America, like most other nations, we have our mythology, especially around the founding of our country. And that's just one that's kind of stuck with us over the years. But if any of our listeners are interested, please do a little research on your own. And be sure to, let us know what you find out. All right.
Number 2 on our list. I'm sure many of our listeners are very much aware of Paul Revere's ride, screaming, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" But that's pretty stupid. It would kind of be like riding down the street of your neighborhood saying, "The Americans are coming! The Americans are coming!" Because they were all British.
Right. They were all British citizens at the time, by law. Even today, if you're a British citizen, you can't ever fully denounce your citizenship. You can only have dual citizenship. So basically, once you're British, you're always British to some extent. So for him to ride down the street and say the British are coming, he would have probably got a couple of odd looks, to say the least.
So in actuality, he was riding down the street saying the regulars are coming, because that's what the British Army in the colonies was referred to as. They were the British regulars,
right?
Those that we'd normally see depicted in red coats, as we would refer to them, air quotes, since y'all can't see those,
right? In case you couldn't tell,
sorry, y'all are just gonna have to get over that. I will try and tell you that I'm air quoting when I'm air quoting, but
use your imagination. But yes, he would say more accurately, the regulars are coming to let you know exactly who is coming and more or less to warn you of their intention. So another one that was, I believe, popularized by a writer named Longfellow, if I'm not mistaken. Again, a little research and a little homework there. All right.
Number 3 on our list. We're all taught, especially on Columbus Day, from the time we're in elementary school, that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered the New World.
The New World. Despite
being the United States.
2 million plus people already living here.
When in actuality, dude rolled up on the shores of a place that we all like to go on vacation nowadays, down on the Yucatan Peninsula, the Caribbean.
The Caribbean. Vacation spot of many people throughout the year.
That'd be Mexico for those of us laymen.
Or Latin America.
Latin America.
Yes, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492.
On the Nina, the Punta, and the Pinta. Sorry. I may have just cussed for our Latin audience. And the Santa Maria?
Santa Maria, yes. Yeah. So the only thing factual in that statement is he did sail in 1492 and landed in
hey, my boats were right.
Your boats were right. I'm saying the little rhyme we did. 2 of your boats were right. The other one, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, the middle one was a little off.
Yeah, it is a little bit. But yes, he sailed 1492, landed on an island he named Hispaniola. I believe it's currently the Dominican Republic, or the DR. Interesting fact, besides the fact that the Taino people were living on the island at the time, and all the other millions of inhabitants on the main continent, he did not actually discover America, but he is the one credited for launching the Age of Discovery, because after him, lots and lots of other people came and started to colonize and all those other things we learned about.
That kind of brings us to point number 4, I think. A lot of people think not necessarily Columbus, but if it was Columbus or whoever, they think that during that time period that Europeans were discovering America at that point in time, right, when in actuality,
the first
Vikings.
The Vikings, right. The first European contact to be substantiated by archaeology. They landed in up in Canada now, around Newfoundland. And
then came south and into, or possibly, I'm not sure if we confirmed that or not.
They have found some archaeological evidence. They found, I think, butternut seeds, which grow further south. But they have also, in the Viking sagas that tell the story...
Butternut seeds, what's the significance of that?
They grow at a warmer climate, so they would have to got them further south.
Oh, so they would have had to come to
further south down.
United States, or what it's now, modern day United States, and taking them back to Canada?
Right. Other archaeologists and historians theorize that perhaps they got involved with the extensive trade network with the natives. But in the Viking sagas, the land they colonized or attempted to was called Vinland, or Land of the Vines. Again, they would have to go on further south to encounter any vine-like plants such as grapes. So there is both archaeological and literal literature evidence to suggest that They did go further south, but there's only been one confirmed Viking settlement discovered, to my knowledge. It's up in Newfoundland. You can go visit. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
So it would make sense that it's called Newfoundland now.
Yeah, it's just kind of coincidence there, but no. But yes, the Vikings, Leif Erikson arrived in 1001 AD, nearly 500 years before our boy Columbus.
But Columbus never actually officially arrived here.
As Columbus never actually set foot on what would become North America. Even though there are a bunch of cities named after him, and there's a national holiday, and all that other good stuff. He never actually made it to what would become the United States.
Kind of makes you wonder why we've been told that for so long.
Well, it was popularized by Washington Irving, and when he was writing early on in his career, and the Italian Americans at the time kind of latched onto the story because they were arriving and being persecuted. And so they kind of helped perpetuate that misinformation Washington Irving put out there in an effort to ease the assimilation process, I guess you could say.
I mean, it kind of seems like every group of immigrants that came to the United States in any given time was always kind of having fun with that. But everybody always picks on the new kid.
Oh, yeah.
That's how it goes.
Go back to the Irish got picked on. Don't get me started.
The Chinese got picked on.
The Chinese. Don't get me started on the poor folks.
The poor folks, Lord
help us all. But yeah, that's kind of one of the lasting legacies of America is, pick on the new kid.
Pick on the new kid. Or the one that's different.
Oh yeah, different will definitely get you picked on. It's kind of like high school.
Kind of like point number 5 in our 5 facts.
Oh,
the Salem witch trials.
Good transition. I like it.
If anybody's a Monty Python fan.
Oh, Lord.
She's a witch. Can we burn her?
Yes.
No witches were ever, no witches were actually burned because there's no such thing as witches, but no people were burned as part of the Salem witch trials. That's our last point.
Right. Salem witch trials took place 1692, Salem, Massachusetts.
I think like 200 people were tried for...
Yes, I believe it was about 200, and then 19 people were hanged due to being found guilty of being a witch by, let's call it less than scientific methods of inquiry.
Less than scientific methods.
The reason so many people survived is the only way you could escape with your life was to plead guilty to practicing magic or witchcraft.
How do you know she's a witch?
Well,
because she looks like one.
She looks like one. But yes, no witches or accused witches were ever actually burned at the stake.
Now, there were some that were drowned.
Yes, as a method of determining if one is in fact a witch or not.
Well, I think that was an interrogation method that was just romanticized into thinking that, if they sank.
Right.
If they sank, they weren't a witch. If they floated, they were a witch. But in actuality, they just sank because they had gotten drowned because people were trying to get a confession out of them. So if they, in fact, could not get a confession, she must not really not be a witch because, she never said she was a witch to the point where she drowned.
Yeah. A witch would have saved herself.
And then there was there was a guy that was stoned to death?
Yes, Giles Corley's popularized in Nathaniel Hawthorne's book on the Salem witch trials.
Is he real, or is he?
He's a real person.
Okay.
It was a method known as pressing back in the day. If you were accused and wouldn't give a plea of guilty or not guilty, they would just stack stones on your chest until you gave a plea. But he never would, and eventually the weight was too much for him, and it crushed him to death.
Famous last words?
More weight.
Sweet. Defiant till the end, I guess.
Oh yeah, that early American spirit.
Yeah, because you were kind of doomed if you did, doomed if you didn't. Because if you didn't say you were a witch, you were going to die because they were going to crush you. If you did say you were a witch, that you were going to die because they were going to hang you.
Well, most would, if they admitted are committed to admitting that they were witches, you would. That was the only way to save your soul, because then you admitted to your sin and you could be forgiven by God. But if you kept denying that you were a witch because you weren't actually a witch, we're going to find a way to prove you were. And
what was the prevailing religion in Salem at the time? Was it a Puritan?
Puritan.
Okay. I didn't know if it was. We weren't quite into the Christian realm in Salem at that point. It was kind of a weird offshoot.
It's a sect of Christianity that's known for their very strict adherence to biblical or canon law, and if at any point it was a society centered around the church, and the church held the power as far as.
So church was government.
Right. It was, as well as a religious institution, it was also your governing body.
And this was what year?
1692.
1692, it was Salem witch trials?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
200 years after Columbus. And at the time, church held a lot of power. You did have a governor.
Kind of the reason why we might want to, you said 1692, maybe, almost a little less than 100 years later, put a piece in the Constitution that...
I'm just going to put this right here.
Leans a little bit towards separation of church and government.
Just a little bit there.
Might not be a terrible idea.
To avoid such persecutions on religious fervor.
To say the least.
Just to, hopefully, I don't remember many more witch trials after that, but but yes, the point on the Salem trials is even though the European counterparts burned witches at the stake, the Americans never did. Just I guess you could say a little more civilized. No, but
I don't know if I'd call drowning people, hanging people, and crushing people with stones much more civilized.
Well, not by a lot, but definitely a measurable amount.
I can't pick, which one I would prefer to die by. I think I'd prefer hanging because that's a little quicker.
Probably a little more instantaneous.
Yeah, because it wasn't really about the choking; it was about the snap.
Yeah, fast drop and
the trap door. Yeah, it's not the fall that kills you; it's the sudden stop.
Sudden stop is what's going to get you.
But those are our first 5 for episode 1. We intend to continue this for episode 2. This is not intended to be our continued format, but we figured this would be a good way to open up what we're doing and give an idea of how we're gonna kind of counteract what's generally taught and generally just believed. Of course, most people aren't gonna question anything. They're just gonna take things at face value and run with it. But our point here is to challenge you. Don't take our words for anything.
Oh, absolutely.
At some point, we'll have a page up and we'll have show notes with
references,
sources and whatnot, so that you can check what we say and by all means call us out on anything that we may have wrong.
We're always open to lively debates.
Oh yeah. The whole purpose of this is just to get you to be open to question what you've been told.
And you'll find the world's a lot more complicated than you were taught. But
it's a lot more interesting than what we were taught.
Far more interesting.
I mean, not as safe as we've been taught, but a lot more interesting to say the least.
Oh yeah, let's try to end on a high note there. But
no, I mean, it's a wonderful place, but you can't have the light without the dark, man.
That's true. You got to have balance.
Balance in all things. But we plan on getting into some pretty interesting subjects, conspiracy theories. And actual conspiracies.
And the difference between the
two. We have a special guest already lined up for a milestone after our milestone episode number 5. A little teaser for episode 5. Historical naughty bits. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But this is your host Will,
your co-host Kevin,
telling you to trust but verify.